Voters in St Kitts and Nevis head to the polls in crucial general elections. Cuban medical brigade arrives in Peru as COVID-19 deaths toll exceeds 5,000. And forces loyal to Libya's internationally recognized government claim full control of the capital, Tripoli. From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South. I am Doris Polo. Polls have opened at 7 a.m. and are set to close at 6 p.m. in St Kitts and Nevis as citizens vote in general elections amid the COVID-19 pandemic. Prime Minister Dr. Timothy Harris is seeking a second term in office after winning the last polls in 2015. His team, Unity Party, had secured 7 of the 11 seats. Dr. Denzel Douglas hopes to reclaim leadership of the country. He is the longest-serving Prime Minister from 1995 to 2015. The Caribbean community has sent an observer mission to oversee the elections. Now, on Thursday, CARICOM sent the observer mission to St Kitts and Nevis to monitor the elections today. CARICOM said the mission was sent at the invitation of the government of St Kitts and Nevis. The CARICOM officials are set to meet with the electoral authorities, leaders of political parties and other stakeholders of the country. They will monitor the voting process, including the opening and closing of polls, the casting of ballots, as well as the vote counting process.
Constitutional parliament.
Speaking of elections in Puerto Rico, the president of the State Elections Commission, Juan Davila Rivera, officially submitted a request to the U.S. Department of Justice to hold a vote on the island's status. The initiative seeks authorization for $2.5 million to fund a yes or no to statehood referendum, which is promoted by the ruling pro-independence New Progressive Party. Puerto Rico has been subjected to U.S. colonial rule since 1898 and has been a freely associated state since 1952. In 2016, the island acknowledged that its government lacks sovereign powers, as it made most of the world think for more than 6 decades. Moving on, the Bolivarian Alliance for the Peoples of Our America, ALBA, has denounced the announcement of illegal sanctions by the Trump administration against Nicaragua. 2 high-level officials of the Nicaraguan government were named by the United States Treasury Department: the head of the Armed Forces of Nicaragua, Julio Cesar Aviles, and Housing Minister Iván Acosta. The unilateral, coercive and interventionist measures affect the whole of society, despite claims that they target only certain individuals. ALBA calls for the international community to defend the principles of respect for sovereignty and self-determination of states. Political and social sectors in Colombia have expressed great concern over the arrival of U.S. troops to their nation. They say President Iván Duque's foreign policy has fallen in line with the White House's warmongering.
Social and political organizations presented a legal complaint at the Attorney General's office, asking for an investigation into the defense minister, the foreign minister, and the Colombian ambassador in the U.S. for pushing aggressive policies against Venezuela, which violate the Colombian constitution.
There was a conversation in Washington, D.C. between the foreign minister and Francisco Santos, in which he says that he would personally organize undercover operations in Colombia to attack Venezuela. We also saw what happened with the former Venezuelan general, Cliver Alcala, who was detained after an arsenal of weapons he acquired was discovered near the border with Venezuela, which were going to be used in a coup attempt.
This complaint comes after the announcement of the arrival of members of the U.S. South Command to 5 different regions in Colombia. According to human rights groups, this creates dangerous tension with the neighboring country.
We are seeing our government has been forcefully destroying crops, violating the rights of campesinos, taking over their lands, breaking all sorts of international and humanitarian laws. On top of this, U.S. troops are coming to our territory without approval from the Senate or from Congress, much less from the people.
Experts agree the Colombian government's foreign policy is incentivizing conflict, falling in line with the United States' warmongering.
We hope that over the next few days, we can persuade the government to ask these troops to leave the country, but we will need Congress, the Council of State, and the Constitutional Court to back this plea.
Colombian media have reported that the U.S. troops are already in Bogotá and will be under quarantine for 14 days before heading out to their respective outposts. Meanwhile, the Senate has asked for the defense minister to attend their session and explain why U.S. troops are being deployed in Colombia.
We have more stories coming up, so don't go anywhere. Welcome back. Ecuador's Ministry of Defense has approved an agreement that would allow the armed forces to use lethal force against protesters. The Ombudsman's office has since requested the repeal of the proposal, saying it violates human rights.
Ministerial Agreement 179 has entered the nation's official registry. The agreement would allow the Ecuadorian armed forces to progressively use lethal force against the people.
Trying to control internal activities when you are not prepared to, it provokes a distortion on the role of the armed forces and violates human rights, mainly to people's lives, and would break restrictions on cruel and degrading treatment.
Part of the agreement indicates that the armed forces may use force to repress gatherings, demonstrations, protests, and situations of internal violence that could result in serious calamities.
It cannot be that when Ecuadorian workers protest, they are repressed. Neoliberalism wants to silence workers, and we already said we won't accept it. This is an evidence of the government's inability to solve economic and sanitary issues the country is facing.
The scale to determine the appropriate use of force is classified in 5 levels, allowing, as a last option, the use of firearms with lethal ammunition to allegedly neutralize violent situations.
If you take a gun and shoot it at a civilian, that's a murder. The progressive use of weapons is for the police, not for those who are trained for war. The police is the one that has the specific crowd control tools like tear gas. In addition, the police also have all the necessary protective equipment.
This ministerial agreement is coming out mere months after the popular uprising of October 2019, considered to be the most important in recent years in Ecuador. It also shows the popular rejection against the last economic measures, as further mobilizations are already being planned.
Peru's government has extended the mandatory quarantine by 90 days as the COVID-19 death toll has surpassed 5,000. This comes after the country had already restarted economic activities back in May, despite experts' recommendations against the decision. Peru has so far registered 178,000 cases of the coronavirus. On Wednesday, a Cuban medical brigade arrived in the Andean nation to help battle the spread of the virus. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro on Thursday presented the latest report on the COVID-19 situation in the country.
Today we have discovered 31 new cases of COVID-19 via local transmission. This is the highest number over 12 weeks. There's also 104 cases coming from abroad, 135 cases total.
Staying in Latin America, COVID-19 cases are mounting in El Salvador despite strict measures imposed by the government. Over 2,000 people have been diagnosed with the novel coronavirus in the Central American nation since the outbreak started. President Nayib Bukele imposed a mandatory quarantine nationwide and closed down all borders back on March 21st, 2 days after the first COVID-19 case was detected in the country. Regardless, every day since then, infections rise significantly as citizens decry a lack of aid from the government to be able to stay at home for such long periods of time. Still in El Salvador, rescue efforts are continuing after Tropical Storm Cristobal made landfall on Wednesday, wreaking havoc across the country. Children are among the 6 people still missing. They are believed to have been buried in a landslide in the town of Santo Tomas. There are nearly 30,000 families affected nationwide, but relief efforts have been hampered by the coronavirus pandemic. Meanwhile, the death toll from Tropical Storm Amanda, which devastated the country last weekend, rose to 26.
We're looking for 7 members of my family, a couple with their 5 children, in the area where the landslide took place in exactly where their home is. I have spoken with the authorities, the director of the police, civil protection, all of them, and so far they haven't confirmed if they found some buried people.
Shifting gears now, Russia has urged U.S. authorities on Thursday to respect the rights of citizens to peacefully protest amid the wave of anti-racist demonstrations sparked by the police killing of George Floyd.
In their attempt to stop looting and other illegal actions, the authorities should not infringe on the rights of Americans to peaceful protest. We would hope that before demonstrating their zeal to defend the rights of the oppressed and dissenters in other countries, the American authorities will start to unequivocally observe democratic standards and respect the freedoms of citizens in their own country. This is long overdue.
Now, New York Mayor Bill DeBlasio was widely booed by his constituents during a vigil for George Floyd. Hundreds jeered Mayor DeBlasio during his brief remarks following a memorial service for the murdered African-American man. This comes after a trove of videos on social media showed New York City police beating down peaceful protesters on Wednesday night. The mayor claimed to not have seen the videos and said the NYPD had shown a lot of restraint. And on Thursday evening, dozens of demonstrators gathered outside the mayor's home just before nightfall, or night 3 of the curfew started, rather. Many held signs calling for racial justice and an end to police brutality across the United States. Meanwhile, hundreds of Palestinians in the occupied Gaza Strip on Thursday night protested against the murder of Floyd. The protesters held placards and banners denouncing systematic racism and police brutality in the United States. Various speakers who addressed the gathering extended their solidarity to protesters in the U.S.
This sit-in is in solidarity with the people of the world, especially with the American people, currently persecuted by racial oppression. All of us, as Palestinians, stand today here to say no to racial discrimination, not to oppression, that we are all free, and we do not distinguish between race and color. This is a solidarity sit-in by the people of Rafah on behalf of the Palestinian people, who express a rejection of American and Israeli racism. The killing of George Floyd is not the first and not the last. And here in Rafah, we have had Rachel Corrie killed.
We're taking one last break, but stay with us. Welcome back. We return with news from Africa. Forces loyal to Libya's internationally recognized government captured the last major stronghold of renegade General Khalifa Haftar near Tripoli on Friday, capping the sudden collapse of his 14-month offensive on the capital. According to military sources, Haftar's forces have been forced to withdraw from the town of Taruna following days of clashes with Government of National Accord troops. The advance by GNA forces has reversed many of Haftar's gains from last year, when he launched the offensive to wrestle control of Tripoli from the GNA.
I am sending a message to the countries who support the aggression and who helped kill Libyans and destroy the country, telling them that your bid has failed, and we will sue you after you have tasted defeat at the doors of Tripoli. We will always stay loyal to the blood of our martyrs and the sacrifice of our heroes. Hence our decision not to sit on the table with a war criminal, because he has never been a partner in the political process or the peace process.
Ethiopia received over 500,000 masks and other medical supplies as a donation from 5 Chinese companies and the Dongguan municipal government on Tuesday. Local authorities said the donation will play a critical role in helping the city of Addis Ababa overcome the challenges posed by COVID-19.
The support between our two countries is mutual, not one way, or one country at the receiving end. We support each other. So from above, we can see that the relationship between China and Ethiopia is really what our two governments called comprehensive, strategic, cooperative partnership. It is strategic as it will make a difference in our development, as its significance goes beyond bilateral. We aim to make our cooperation a model for China-Africa cooperation.
We're very grateful to the Chinese government, people and institutions for your support. We should take the necessary COVID-19 precautions, but if the worst is to come, it is obvious that we need ventilators and ambulances. We hope your support will continue until Ethiopians triumph the fight against COVID-19.
Tunisians were able to return to mosques and cafes on Thursday as the country lifted most lockdown restrictions. Back in March, Tunisia closed its international borders, stopped all movement between towns and cities, shuttered mosques, shops, schools, cafes and restaurants, and imposed a nightly curfew. The North African nation has recorded just over 1,000 cases of the novel coronavirus and 48 deaths. The figures pale in comparison to the nearly 10,000 cases reported in neighboring Algeria. Given the success in containing the virus, the Tunisian Minister of Major Projects has stated she hopes that foreign tourists will be able to return to the country this summer. South Africa's worst hit region by the pandemic is no longer testing most people under 55, as officials try to clear a backlog of 27,000 tests. Western Cape Province will test people under 55 only if they have serious health conditions, have been admitted to a hospital, or are a frontline health worker. The province continues to see a worrying increase in infections that has made it the epicenter of the outbreak in Africa. The Western Cape has a population of around 6 million and more than 24,000 confirmed cases of COVID-19. Moving on, health officials in the Republic of Congo have expressed appreciation for China's medical support to help the country in the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic. A team of Chinese medical experts arrived in the capital, Brazzaville, last week. In the coming days, the team will share their experiences in the capital and Pointe Noire and train personnel, including local government officials and medical workers, in the fight against the virus. The Republic of Congo has reported over 600 coronavirus cases and 20 COVID-19 fatalities.
We always know that China is a friend we can count on. Today, like all other countries, we are facing the difficulty given the persistence of COVID-19 pandemic. Under such circumstances, the Chinese government still sends support to help us strengthen the capacities of our team to respond to this pandemic.
China's National Health Commission reported 5 new imported COVID-19 cases and no new deaths on Thursday. The commission also registered 3 new asymptomatic patients, as other 297 asymptomatic patients are under medical observation. The Chinese city of Wuhan has tested nearly 10 million people in an unprecedented 19-day campaign to check an entire city. The Chinese mainland has now recorded 78,327 recovered patients. And in Wuhan, the last 2 known confirmed COVID-19 patients were discharged from hospital. According to local authorities on Friday, Hubei province has now 0 COVID-19 cases. In Vietnam, 92% of patients have recovered from COVID-19. On top of this, the Asian country has not registered any new cases in the last 49 days. as the number of overall cases has not risen past 328. According to authorities, 4 patients were sent home over the last 24 hours, bringing the number of recovered patients to 302. The remaining 26 are still being treated across the country. Preventative measures are still being enforced. And with that, we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website, telusurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Doris Polo. Thanks for watching.